Okay, so let me lay out some rules. I was introduced. My name is Nicolette Springer. My name is Nicolette Springer, and I am the Director of Government Affairs for the League of Women Voters for the state of Florida. And many of you may know me. I was your lobbyist for last session, and this year I moved into a new role as your Director of Government Affairs. And today I am going to be moderating this wonderful panel. Let me tell you what to expect today. So we are going to introduce our legislators, and then we will have questions that I will ask, and each legislator will have about 3 minutes to answer the question. If there is a follow-up from another legislator, they will have 1 minute for that follow-up. Leslie right here is our lovely timekeeper, and so please be respectful of the timekeeper. She will hold up warning signs when you have a little bit of time. Once we get through those questions from me, and these questions came from membership, so I'm just asking the questions that were submitted by the members here in Orange County. Then we will open it up to questions here in the room. There will be a mic in the back, and you all can line up. I ask that you please be respectful of time. You have about 30 seconds to ask the question, and please ask only one question each. That would be just let us know your name and then go right into the question. So today I'm going to start with introducing our panel. And before I do that, let me tell you that session starts a little sooner than last year. So this legislative update is very timely because next week, these wonderful legislators and myself will be up in Tallahassee for the first committee week of the year. And then we'll be in Tallahassee again for 2 weeks in October, 2 weeks in November, 1 week in December, and then we start session in January, and we go through the middle of March. So this is a great time to get to know what they expect and what they're hoping to get accomplished in 2020 session. So our first legislator that I'm going to bring up to the panel, and when I call your name, I'll do a little bio, and then you can come on up and take a seat, is Senator David Simmons from Seminole County. And Senator Simmons was so kind today because this was last minute, and I do appreciate you taking the time to be with us. Senator Simmons represents all of Seminole County and parts of Volusia County. He is a Seminole County resident, and he has been a long-time Seminole County resident. He is an attorney for a financial management group, and he is the father of 2 daughters. He's a graduate of Vanderbilt University Law School, and he has been active in Seminole and Central Florida for over 2 decades. Senator Simmons serves on 4 Senate committees. He is the chair of the Judiciary Committee. He is a member of the Appropriations Committee, the Appropriations Subcommittee on Education, and the Committee and the Rules Committee as well. He's a member of. So Senator Simmons, if you please join us. Next, I will represent I'm going to introduce our very own District 47. We are in District 47, Representative Anna V. Eskamani. Anna represents Orange County in the area that we're in and most of the western part of Orange County. She is an Orlando native and a daughter of an Iranian immigrant who have worked relentlessly to protect all members of our community through effective advocacy, bold leadership, and smart management. She sits on 3 legislative committees. One is the Local, Federal, and Veterans Affairs Subcommittee, the Oversight, Transportation, and Public Management Committee, and the Ways and Means Committee. Next, we have Representative Joy Goff-Marcil, represents District 30, which includes portions of Orange County and Seminole County. Representative Goff-Marcil was elected to District 30 in 2018. She is born and raised in District 30 and is currently resides in Macon. She is married and has 3 children. She's a graduate of Florida State University and Stetson Law. She serves on the Health and Human Services Committee, Higher Education, Career Readiness Subcommittee, Pre-K-12 Innovation Subcommittee, and the Public Integrity and Ethics Committee. Last but not least, we have Representative Guillermo representing District 49 as the east part of Orange County. Carlos is a graduate of UCF and currently lives in Orlando with his new husband. Congratulations to the newlyweds. He was first elected to Florida House in 2016 and subsequently re-elected. He serves on the Higher Education, Career Readiness, and Subcommittee. He's the ranking Democrat on that committee. So as a reminder, I will be posing some questions to the legislators, and I'm going to point them to an individual legislator. If the question that I ask, if someone would like a follow-up, follow-up, so if I pose a question to Rep. Smith, if someone would like to follow up, please let us know. We'll give you 1 minute to follow up with that question. We're going to start with what the league, the league has 7 priorities this year, and it, as always, one of our biggest priorities is education, and it's very important to our membership. So I'm going to pose this question to Representative Goff-Marcil. We want to talk a little bit about education. Actually, you know what, ladies and gentlemen, I've been there before we have any questions. These ladies and gentlemen would like to introduce themselves. And I apologize for skipping that part. So we're going to give you guys each 3 minutes to please tell us a little bit about yourself, what your legislative priorities are this session, and if you have any takeaways from the prior session, what maybe you thought was the best thing that came out of last session, and maybe what you thought was the biggest disappointment, but you feel empowered to move that forward this coming session. So we'll start from the left and go to the right. So Carlos, Representative Smith, will you please let us hear?
Well, good morning. Is it still morning or is it afternoon? Good day, League of Women Voters in Orange County. I am Carlos Guillermo Smith.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'm Carlos Guillermo Smith, the State Representative, House District number 49. Thank you for the wonderful introduction, Nicolette. I am serving my 2nd term representing the UCF Waterford Lakes Union Park area, and it's an honor to serve with these 3. This session was tough for hardworking Floridians. I think it was tough for immigrants. It was tough for students and teachers. It was tough all the way around. I know that we're going to hear different perspectives. But I want to start off on maybe a positive note on what I believe was a sincere accomplishment of the Florida Legislature in the 2019 session. First, the First Step Act was passed, which was a baby step in overall a comprehensive criminal justice reform, which we still have to add to, and we'll talk a bit more about that. That was bipartisan legislation that I was proud to see passed, even though we have a lot of work to do. The Dignity for Incarcerated Women Act, which allowed for incarcerated women to have access to feminine hygiene products that they're often denied while inmates in our state prison system, was a tremendous step forward. Unemployment benefits for victims of domestic violence was also an important bill that passed, expanding a state needle exchange bill, which would allow for organizations to help stem the new transmissions of HIV and other sexually transmitted diseases as well through clean needle exchange programs. That was expanded. Firefighter cancer presumption coverage was expanded because we know so many of those first responders who sacrifice themselves, their family, and sometimes their lives to keep us safe can have access to the services that they need if they fall ill due to that service. Also, I'm proud to say that we partnered with Representative Eskamani and Republican leadership in the House to substantially boost arts and cultural funding in this last legislative session. So this is a picture for you on how big a deal this was. In the 2018 legislative session, arts and culture funding was cut 95%, down to $2.6 million for 600 not-for-profit organizations to share. In this last budget year, we boosted that $2.6 million to $21.25 million, which is not fully funding yet, but we're moving in the right direction, and I'm extremely proud not only of that arts and culture funding that we secured in a bipartisan fashion, but also the $500,000 that Representative Eskamani, myself, Senator Stewart, and Representative Rathschein secured for the building of the Pulse Memorial on Orange Avenue as well, which is a tremendous effort. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joy Goff-Marcil, representing House District 30, as Nicolette introduced me. I am from my district, and I'm feeling very much at home here because I took piano lessons for 12 years, and I was on this stage once a year learning my piano. So I'm very at home. And if I don't have time at the end, I just wanted to go ahead and thank you all so much for all in front of us, and they come in front of us very quickly, and it is very helpful, all the research you do, and you reach out to different organizations and groups, and it really helps us decide how we want to vote. So I just wanted to reinforce that. Keep doing all the great work you're doing. As far as this session coming up, because Representative Smith covered pretty much, I'm in support of everything that he said, and I supported all he did in this past session. But the one coming up, I am still wanting to protect our public schools and protect our environment, and also protect home rule. Those were three of the main reasons I ran, and I want to continue doing that. A lot of times we are playing defense up there, but that's very important. It's just like when you're driving, you're defensive driving, and that's kind of what we're doing up there. We're defensive drivers in the legislature. And then also on the offense side, I want to support gun safety legislation. That's very important to me. Another reason why I ran. So those are why I'm excited about this next session. So far, I've filed one bill so far, my sixth. It's HB 77. And what that is right now we have a law that if healthcare workers don't pay their student loans, then they can have their license taken away. Now, this doesn't make any sense at all because we need more healthcare workers. We know we have a shortage of them. There's one. And two, they're already punished by having their credit ruined if they don't pay their student loans. And we all know we have a problem with student loans. These healthcare workers are driving up costs of, say, $15,000 to $20,000 a year in student loans, and most of them are 4-year degrees and even master's degrees. So my law would strike the part where they would have their license taken away. Right now, Senator Marco Rubio and Senator Elizabeth Warren have a similar bill in the United States Congress that would do this as well. So that I'm excited about that piece of legislation. Thank you for having me.
All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It is such an honor to be here with you. This is also a homecoming for me because I've been a league member since 2010. I think I was actually one of the first students to join the league when I was at the University of Central Florida. Go Knights! And many of you know that my mom passed away when I was 13 years old, and I have to say there's been a lot of moms in this room who've adopted me and have guided me in my advocacy, so I'm forever grateful for that. District 47, you're in it, so welcome to our visitors. And I want to give a special shout out to my city commissioners. I know Belle Isle is here, I know Steve Orlando is here, and I don't think Winter Park commissioners are here, but forever grateful to our incredible cities, and to echo my colleague, home rule is important to us, ensuring that our cities get to maintain the local characteristics and have control over their issues. With that said, this was my first session, so it was a roller coaster. And very much did my best to build bridges whenever possible, but to also hold people and corporations accountable and to never sacrifice our values. Representative Smith outlined some incredible wins that we had on issues like criminal justice reform, to our ability to fight for arts and culture funding, which we continue on that path in the next session. Affordable housing dollars were also slightly more robust than the year before. I'm sure our senator can speak to it because the Senate budget had fully funded the Sedose Affordable Housing Trust Fund dollars, but it was the House that actually played with the numbers and did not fully fund it. And so those fights continue. And I do think a large part of our work as Democrats, as the loyal opposition in the Florida House, is very much defense, but also trying to find moments of common ground. And I take a lot of pride in being able to engage in some pretty contentious debates, but then going up to my colleague at the end and shaking their hand and thanking them for the good debate. Because I think that civility is much needed in politics today, and we have to do our part to separate as much as we can the issue from the person and try to find opportunities to actually work together. Of course, none of the bills that we filed got a hearing, and unfortunately that is the reality for many freshman Democrats in the House. What I will say is that we'll be filing a few of our bills that will be a priority going into next session. This includes keeping guns out of the hands of domestic violence perpetrators. We filed that bill last session. We'll be filing it again. We already have. Also, 100% renewable energy goals. I'm a firm believer in climate change. I think this crisis is real. We have hurricanes that are more extreme and more frequent than ever before, with most recently in the Bahamas impacting our friends there. And moving away from fossil fuels and towards 100% renewable energy should be a priority for the Sunshine States. So we're filing that bill going into next session. Very hopeful for Republican co-sponsors and doing our best part to always try to find common ground while never sacrificing our values. So thank you so much for having us here. Look forward to the conversation.
Good afternoon, I'm David Simmons. I grew up on a farm in Tennessee. Both of my parents were public school teachers, so I know what it's like to go to the refrigerator and find nothing there. I also know what it's like to work long hours and long days, particularly in the summer. I received 2 of the Legislators with Vision Awards from the League of Women Voters. Very proud of that. And I'm fortunate enough and honored to be the President pro tempore of the Florida Senate. I was chosen by the President of the Senate in 2018 to be the President pro tem. Along with him as the President, President Guillermo is a tremendous leader here in the state of Florida, and to be his partner in the leadership of the Senate is an honor that is so humbling. I have long believed in what I did when I was fortunate enough to give the acceptance speech on the day of organization of the Senate in November of 2018. I spoke about the importance of civility, of treating other people with respect, assuring that if we do that, that you can accomplish so much. And that's what I have dedicated myself to, both while I was in the House of Representatives and now in the Senate. And I can tell you that it's very difficult to call somebody else a bunch of ugly names and then find out that when you're sitting with them trying to resolve a problem, that you find out that if you've done that, it's very difficult to solve that problem. And so I've been fortunate enough to be at the forefront of many of the major pieces of legislation that passed both the House of Representatives when I was there and the Senate. And one of the things that I'm proudest of course, is the comprehensive water bill that we did with the springs and the tremendous funding of $50 million a year that we were able to obtain for our springs, and to set forth the standards that exist for having a clean and protected environment in Florida. I can tell you that I plan on carrying again the Smoking 21 bill, which I carried last session and was able to pass the Senate, but got locked down in the House. We'll add more to the comprehensive water bill so that we can ensure a clean environment. I plan on filing a assault weapons ban that deals with persons under the age of 25 and let it expire in 2025. And I'll tell you probably right about the provision for driver's permits for undocumented persons. And of course, last but not least, by the way, I'm the financial managing partner of a law firm in downtown, not a financial planning firm, but that's okay. That's okay. It's a law firm. It's one of the largest in Central Florida, and I plan on again working to have proper judicial funding, because I believe that the judiciary is in fact the cornerstone of a clean and regulated society. Thanks.
Thank you very much. I just want to remind everyone this is being broadcast on Facebook Live, and Rep. Eskamani reminded me, I want to say if there are any students who are watching, that student membership is free. And so like Rep. Eskamani, who started as a student member, you can also start as a student member. So please go to the Orange County League website and you can sign up. And same for regular membership as well. There is a fee for regular membership, but students are free, and I encourage all of you who are watching to potentially join the league. We would love to have you. I think that Senator Simmons just dropped some breaking news because we were unaware of the fact that you were going to be filing that bill, and so I was going to start with an education question, but I'm going to start with that, and please tell us more about the gun legislation you will be filing.
I plan on filing a bill that is similar to the amendment that I filed in 2018 to the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas school safety bill that passed. And we did that in 2 weeks. The legislature did great things after the tragedy that occurred at Parkland. But I believe that my bill properly defines what an assault weapon ban is within the terms of the Constitution. I believe that it should be limited to individuals, and these are subject to debate as we go through it, less than 25 years of age, and that it will expire of its own terms in 2025. The reason why is I believe that we need to address the real problem that exists with respect to these issues. And when I was growing up, we didn't have individuals, young men, doing what young men do today. And there are a lot of different challenges that they have, mental illness. Certainly the funding of that needs to be increased. But I can assure you that I believe that there are reasonable ways of dealing with this, but at the same time protecting our Second Amendment, which I'll be happy to explain to you why we have the Second Amendment and why it's so essential that we not unreasonably impinge upon those rights.
Thank you, Senator. I'm going to give the question to Rex Smith, and if I can also just point out that Senator Delfano has asked Senator Lee, as the Infrastructure and Security Chairman, to put together a panel and a workshop that will be next Monday at 1 o'clock about mass violence in our state. And most of the bills that will be gun violence bills will pass through that committee. And next Monday at 1 p.m. you can all watch that committee workshop on floridachannel.org. And my question then goes to Rep. Smith. The Senate has put together this workshop to educate their members about mass violence. Can you talk a little bit about your efforts and if the House, if you know if the House doing anything similar?
Thank you, Nicolette. I want to start by, I suppose, responding to a couple things that Senator Simmons mentioned in his remarks. First, I want to say that even though he's been recognized by the League of Women Voters, I was also given the Making Democracy Work Award by the League of Women Voters. particularly because of our advocacy around gun safety and gun violence prevention. I want to applaud Senator Simmons for bringing this proposal forward, because while it is not a comprehensive step towards fully restricting military-grade assault weapons and large capacity magazines, it is certainly a step in the right direction that requires political courage from a Republican Party leader such as Senator Simmons. So I have to applaud you on moving this forward. And I look forward to working with you on that. In the past, Nicolette, to answer your question, I've partnered with the League of Women Voters, the Florida Coalition to Prevent Gun Violence, Equality Florida, the Florida PTA, and others to bring forward comprehensive legislation to ban military-style assault weapons for all ages and large capacity magazines, because we believe that this is a very, very important step in curbing the epidemic of mass shootings. But what we also can't overlook is the reality of everyday gun violence. An assault weapons ban or an assault weapons restriction of any kind is not the end-all solution to gun violence. We need universal criminal background checks as well on all gun purchases. We also need important community intervention programs that would intervene, for example, at hospitals where victims of everyday gun violence, unfortunately, too often are planning retaliation after being victims of gun violence themselves. We have seen across the country many community intervention programs, particularly hospital intervention programs, that can help curb everyday gun violence on the streets that impact particularly minority communities. I think we should put a task force together in Florida to study everyday gun violence as well, I think it's important we pass Representative Eskamani's legislation that would prohibit domestic violence abusers from accessing firearms. I have brought forward legislation as well to disqualify perpetrators of hate crimes from being able to purchase or possess firearms. We also need to make sure that gun store owners and pawn shops are required under state law to secure their firearms overnight. There is no state or federal law that requires them to do so. And I have requested from the Orange County Sheriff's Office and found out about dozens of burglaries in Orange County where firearms were stolen from pawn shops that did not secure their firearms overnight. This is just scratching the surface. There's so much that can be done, but I really look forward to working with Senator Simmons and others because the gun violence crisis is an epidemic that has to be addressed.
I just want to add to that, the Senate really is taking a leadership role in examining mass shootings and having a lot of these courageous conversations. I hope the House will, and you can count on us to push for that to happen. I just want to add that our office recently penned a letter to President Galvano and Chair Tom Lee of this committee to ensure that we don't forget the role that misogyny plays in gun violence. Because though perpetrators of mass shootings and shootings within homes, their motivations are complex, sometimes unknown, but a common trait we see often is a connection to a hatred towards women. And Rep. Smith made the point about Florida, about hate crimes. Florida's hate crimes law does not conform to federal. We don't even have gender or gender identity as a hate crime in Florida law. And when the shooting happened at the Tallahassee yoga studio, though we knew was very much connected to a hatred towards women, there was no ability at state level to prosecute in that way. So I hope for that to be integrated in the conversation, and we'll continue to talk to our leaders on the Senate side about that.
Thank you very much. Next, I'm going to go into the education topic. I'm going to pose this question to Rep. Goff-Marcil. You sit on the education committee. Can you tell us a little bit about legislation about accountability for charter schools and what you're going to propose this year and what you're going to be supporting?
Thank you. I had a bill last session that would require that charter schools had to be not-for-profit, and if they weren't, then they couldn't take public funds. And I was told that bill will not be heard. So then I used it as an amendment to all the private school voucher bills or any bill that came up that had to do with, this is an example of playing defense. So I expect that I might be having to do that again. It all comes down to accountability and accessibility. And that's the way we are fighting it. But the problem is we haven't been able to get any of these amendments through. And every time there was an education bill, we would try to fix that problem, but it was denied. I heard just today that Senator Simmons has an accountability bill that he started through the Senate. I am not familiar with it. I can't wait to read it, but it didn't go anywhere near the House, so that's why I never saw it. So I'm looking forward to seeing that, because anywhere we can improve the accountability and accessibility, that will improve our public schools, because as you all know, they need more funding. We're not funding it to the right amount. It's ridiculous how we're funding it, and teachers aren't being paid, and we have a shortage of teachers. It's just so much we need to do with public schools. So that's where I'm fighting.
Can you also tell us about your school accountability bill, and also you had a school improvement bill last year that neither of those made it out of committee. Can you tell us a little bit about those, if you plan to refile, and how we can help support those bills?
Well, first I want to say that we need to keep everything in perspective. There is a nationwide shortage of teachers, and it's because women have the opportunity to be in other places than education, and education is a tough place to be in today's world. And so we need to pay our teachers more, significantly more. And the first bill I ever filed when I was in the House was to increase the compensation for teachers. But I have personal knowledge of that issue, so with my parents. But I want to say to you that remember this. U.S. News and World Reports just came out. We have the best and we really have the best university system, public university system in the nation. We have the best community college system in the nation. Where do all of these students come from? They come from our state schools, our K through 12 schools. That's exactly where they come from. Because we have truly one of the best education systems, K through 12, pre-K through 12 in the nation as well. Education Week rated it last year at something like 6th in the nation. What is wrong, however, is that there is a difference between those who have and those who do not have. Those children who are at risk, who are in poverty, whether they are, and unfortunately, the vast majority of them are minorities. But the fact of it is that we have to do more. And teachers used to say, educators would say, I'm not a social worker, I'm a teacher. And that's true. And to impose upon them the duty of being a social worker as well as a teacher just doesn't work. But when a child comes to school and he is hungry or she is hungry, they're not going to learn. When a child comes to school and they are not feeling well and don't have any care at home, sufficient care, they're not going to learn. And when they get out of school and get themselves into trouble because they have nowhere to go, or if because their family is moving from many schools that are in poverty areas, what happens is that by the time you do the October count, they've already moved to some other school by the time of the January count. And so what I pushed for and was able to get into the FEFP for Florida as an absolute funding is a what's called community in schools community partnership bill with $43 to $45 million of funding, so that each one of these schools that is a school that is low performing, perpetually low performing, will be able to have this additional funding of $200 per student, which is per FTE. The end result of it is that this is the first dedicated amount to go ahead and provide these social services. The education is one thing, it's another thing to have the ability to extra reading after school or in school, as well as to have the after school things that are so essential that will provide the resources for these children and the teachers who are going to be teaching them, who do teach there, to be able to turn the lives around these children. And you know what? Given the proper help, these children do learn. They learn like anyone else can learn. However, they need to be given that extra help at the beginning. So I did that. I'm very proud of it, and I look forward to continuing to push to assure that we have the best education system in America.
Yes, and I agree with much of what Senator Simmons has said. Look, it's really, really hard to have a robust conversation about how to improve public education in our state in about 30 seconds. But let me give you some quick hot takes on what we need to do to improve our public schools K through 12. First and foremost, we have to raise teacher pay across the board. Because teacher retention is a major issue in our school districts around the state, and in part, the retention in part has to do with poor teacher salaries. We also have to make sure that all of our kids are not living in or going to school in portables. We need more PICO funding for our public school districts so that students can be safer within the confines of the school building, not in portable after portable after portable. We also need to make sure we hire more school psychologists, school guidance counselors, and school social workers so that we can keep our kids safe and we can fully understand all of the issues that they're dealing with. We also have to stop bleeding public school money through vouchers to private schools that have not demonstrated that they are doing a better job than our public schools are with teaching our kids the basics.
I just want to echo that and also add, we have filed House Bill 45, which would ban any public funding to go towards any private school that discriminates against their students, whether it's based on a sexual identity or a disability. which unfortunately right now we have private schools that are receiving public dollars that have in their handbooks discriminatory language around same-sex students and their parents. And these schools are receiving funds through the privatized voucher system. And Senator LWVOC is our Senate companion. We hope to have that bill move forward. There seems to be a lot of support issues of equality, especially on these issues. So I hope it applies to our educational system. And at the same time, too, there's always the question of where is the money, right? And a few weeks ago, the Sentinel reported that our legislature passed, extended a tax package that was passed in 2018 that basically refunded about $500 million to the state's largest corporations. These are corporations that are already paying a lot less in taxation because of the federal tax plan that President Trump passed. And now we're giving them back money that we can use for these things. And so I also want folks to rest assured knowing that when we talk about paying teachers more, it doesn't mean we have to necessarily even raise taxes. It's a prioritization of taxation and also how do we always spend our money. We have the dollars. We passed the largest budget in Florida history at $91 billion. That was a Republican governor and leadership. And so obviously there's consensus that we have expenses to pay for, but I think it comes down to what we prioritize. Is it going to be people or is it going to be major corporations? Thank you.
Senator Simmons, go ahead.
Yes, let's talk about vouchers. We have 2.9 million students in the state of Florida, and probably a little bit more than 120,000 of those are using vouchers, and 10,000 of those are the Gardner vouchers, or Gardner scholarships. Those are for families in which the parents have students who have significant, as President Gardner called it, unique abilities because his son, Andy Jr., has Down syndrome. We fund 10,000 of those students to go to places, to schools where there are special abilities to give them the special treatment that they, and teaching and the care that they need. Now, I don't know anyone who objects to that because it's very difficult for a public school system to be able to provide the essential support and education that these children are given. There's another 110,000 that are getting the what are called the tax credit scholarships, and I can say to you that the vast majority of those are getting educations in probably 16 to 19% of them are in Catholic schools, and a whole series of schools. The thing that I point out to you is that there are certain of these schools who receive vouchers, and if you're going to take public money, you need to make sure that you meet the qualifications and the standards that we place on schools that we have as public schools. No doubt about it.
Education is such a priority for the league, so I'm going to allow one more follow-up from Representative.
Just a brief response. The issue is not the Gardner Scholarship or the McKay Scholarship. I'll speak for myself when I say I support those voucher programs. The problem is that the McKay Scholarship and the Gardner Scholarship were the camel's nose under the tent. Those voucher programs were created, and then totally new and expensive voucher programs unrelated to those were created and expanded afterwards to the tune of now $1 billion worth of taxpayer money is spent annually on all the voucher programs combined. Senator Simmons is correct that they don't, but they should follow accountability standards that our public schools have to follow. But some of these new voucher programs, particularly the one that was created this year, the so-called Family Empowerment Scholarship, which is a voucher, basically says if you are a family that makes up to $77,000 per year, the taxpayers of Florida will pay for your child's private school education, no questions asked. We cannot afford that. We have a public education system for a reason. We cannot afford to say as a state, you get a private school voucher and you get a private school voucher and everyone gets a private school voucher just because. We have to rein these voucher programs in and we have to fully fund our public schools.
Senator Commissioners, just one quick follow-up question. I want to clarify, did you state that you believe that there should be accountability for our charter schools, that they should be having teacher certification at the same level as our public schools, that the students should be, tested and should be coming out of our private schools with the same level of accountability that they're coming out of our public schools? So if those children return to our public school, we have a mechanism to see where they are and to make sure that they came from a program that was sufficient to our state public schools.
Well, first, charter schools are public schools. They are schools that are operated within the school districts themselves. There are issues about the contractors who provide those services, a road contractor providing for the DOT and building a road. But the question is the fairness and the propriety of the charter schools receiving funds that we need to assure that there is the proper accounting for that. But with respect to vouchers, which is the voucher that is given so that someone can take his or her child to a private school, that, like I say, there are about 110,000 of those right now under two programs other than Gardner and McKay. But I can say to you that yes, I filed legislation in order to assure that those schools were and are qualified, because it is my view that if you're going to take these monies, you need to be a qualified recipient and make sure that first, all of the standards are met with respect to your teachers, as well as the quality of your education, as well as the safety of the facility that these students are. And the vast majority of them are. Yeah, there are some fringe ones that are a significant problem, which we need to deal with.
Thank you so much, Senator. I appreciate that clarification. The next question is going to Representative Goff-Marcil. In your introduction, you stated that you ran for office one of the issues was to protect home rule. Last year, you filed a legislative preemption bill that did not make it out of committee. Can you tell us a little bit about that bill and how you intend to protect home rule this session?
Yes, that bill simply would make it where you had to have a 2/3 majority as opposed to a simple majority whenever a preemption bill came in front of the House, and it did not go anywhere. There's a lot of bills that were passed that either preempted local government or attempted to and were defeated. I expect that to happen again this next session. We're having issues right now in my hometown that I represent, Maitland, where people are coming into neighborhoods and building memory homes in the neighborhood. And maybe that's a good thing, but they are being preempted by the state. So they're not being able to go to their local government and help figure out how that will look. And if they're also concerned that they could somehow convert it to something else. And it's a big concern for residential neighborhoods. But that's an example of how those local neighbors can go to their local officials and work out all these problems. Another example is in Orlando, where they had a gardening bill where a certain percentage of your front yard could be for gardening, vegetable gardens. That was worked out, and then our legislature preempted it where everybody can have a front yard garden whenever they want. And personally, I would like a front yard garden, but I think the local government should decide that. You should be able to decide whether your neighborhood has these kinds of activities. So yes, I am a big supporter of home rule. Local government works best at those local level. Our state is too diverse. We have South Florida is completely different than North Florida and Central Florida. So everything needs to be, I don't want to say everything. So I'll tell you where my line draws, okay? Because I believe in home rule, but if it is something that is not protecting the citizens or the environment, then that needs to be a statewide law. That's where my line is on the home rule.
Thank you.
Yeah, real quick. So the committees that I served on were not my committees of preference. So I was placed on some pretty random committees of some pretty wonky topics that I had no background in. One of them being local federal veterans affairs, ways and means, really important committees that I had to learn fast and continue to master. But it gave me the opportunity to see a lot of home rule bills more than once. And this debate was one that was constant. And on the vegetable garden bill, I'm a vegetarian, so all I eat are vegetables. And that was the first no vote that I did, and it hurt my heart because, I love vegetables. But again, just focusing on home rule as a really important value for us to uphold. And I'm proud to say that the League of Cities actually deemed me as one of their defenders of home rule. And so to that point, we have to be really intentional in inspiring our local cities and your constituents in local cities to talk to lawmakers about this. I do think that if more everyday citizens spoke to lawmakers about why they care about their cities, why they want to maintain home rule, it could help change the conversation. We have a lot of Republican colleagues who were city commissioners, were county commissioners, so I think if you can appeal at that level, it can help curve the conversation in a way that's more, hopefully more balanced, because the reality is that I'll speak to the Florida House, not only did we pass so many preemptive bills, but the legislature on the House side is actually playing a part in litigation on the transportation tax that took place in Hillsborough right now. The Florida House is a part of that lawsuit. And if there's a win for them in that, then it could impact Orange County's ability to consider the transportation and sales tax. So all these issues tie back to what we're able to even allow voters to vote on. So it is really important to be engaged on this issue, though it can be really wonky or complicated for those who are not involved in city government.
Thank you. Hold on to your mic because the next question is for you. Can you tell us a little bit about Medicaid expansion and what we can do in our state to make that?
Sure. So everyone here probably knows that I'm a longtime advocate for Medicaid expansion. When I worked at Planned Parenthood, which was my first job when I got out of college, it was 2012. And 2 years earlier, we had just made history in passing the Affordable Care Act, which part of that provided the opportunity for states to expand Medicaid. What that means was basically just expand the threshold so that more Floridians under a certain income bracket who right now don't qualify for what is a very narrow Medicaid standard can access Medicaid. There's an approximation that 500,000 to 800,000 Floridians are in this coverage gap. I think it was 2013 or 14 session where we actually had a special session for this issue, and it was the Senate who really tried to lead the charge on finding a compromise to expand Medicaid. But unfortunately, on the House side, there was a stalemate. There was 8 hours of debate around why Medicaid expansion is important, and though the Senate had created a compromise, the House never moved, so it never happened. I will say at this point, it feels like the conversation has kind of died down. I mean, it still comes up in committee environments. It came up on the House floor this past session with folks asking questions on it, and a bill was filed to expand Medicaid on the House side, and it will be filed again. But I do think it's important that we consider circumventing legislature with the ballot amendment that's on the table right now. Folks are collecting signatures to have Medicaid be expanded through a constitutional amendment, which we have seen other states be successful in. But if you are in the medical field, or you're a safety net provider, maybe you benefited from the Affordable Care Act, or have family or friends who benefit from Medicaid expansion, I can't stress enough the importance of sharing your story to lawmakers, really emphasizing the importance of this issue. Right now, 800,000 Floridians don't have anywhere to go when it comes to health insurance coverage, and healthcare quality and access is one of the biggest issues for every Floridian. I know that for my mom, going through her cancer treatments, just experiencing all the burdens that come with illness, let alone just trying to make sure kids are healthy. And I'll never understand why a state like Florida can provide access to things like Florida Kid Care, which lets a child who is low income have some access to health care while their parent remains uninsured. A pregnant woman in Florida can get access to Medicaid for her pregnancy, but she will lose it shortly after. And again, how can a mother without insurance take care of her child? And so I think it's so critical that we continue to have the conversation, but I will say that the Florida House is not one to consider it. So the advocacy is really, really important on this issue. Senator Simmons.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to have been the Rules Chairman while President Gardner in the Senate in 2015 pushed for not Medicaid, what I call Medicaid expansion, but in fact Medicaid extinction. You say, how's that? is that Medicaid is not what we want our young mothers to be on. We have a system that is broken. We have a totally broken system. A system that provides that once you make so much money, you automatically get nothing after that. No help, no assistance. We have something that induces and incentivizes young women not to be able to work. Why? Because if they make so much money, they can't go ahead and get the assistance. We need a system that extinguishes Medicaid so that these people can work and become productive, more productive members of society, rather than a system that penalizes them for success and sharing in the American dream. Our system is broken. There is no doubt that our medical system is broken, but expanding it and making it worse is not the solution. Right now, you know where we send people who don't have insurance? We send them to the emergency rooms of our hospitals, who must take them, and when they take them, you know what? We all pay for it because they're using that as their primary care. We have a system that does not work. We do not want to expand that system. We want to completely redo it. And if we could get a Medicaid waiver from the federal government so that we could put our own plan together that would in fact incentivize people to work and not penalize them for their success, we would do a lot better.
This will be our last follow-up from Representative Smith, and then we're going to go to questions.
Some of what Senator Simmons said sounds a little bit like he might support a single-payer healthcare system. Let's extinguish Medicaid, and let's move towards a Medicare for all system so that everyone can be as productive as possible.
The free market is going to be the solution. The free market will be the solution.
As folks stand up for questions, I just want to add to that. Unfortunately, Senator Simmons' picture of the fiscal cliff is very true. And through our PhD program, we actually interviewed families in Paramore, and that was such a common trait, was that families are worried about making too much money beyond what they already barely make because they're worried about losing Medicaid and losing access to other services like food stamps, for example. So the fiscal cliff is something we have to seriously look and expand that threshold, which is why Medicaid expansion is a conversation worth having. But I also want to add that the Florida House, instead of talking about Medicaid expansion, we talked about Medicaid work requirements, which would require someone to work a certain amount of hours or lose their Medicaid without even expanding the threshold, which means even if someone had that part-time job making minimum wage, not being able to afford insurance, they might actually be pushed off Medicaid, which doesn't put them in a good place. Most people who are on Medicaid are working families. So it's such a wicked problem, but I think the reality is that folks have their blinders on when it comes to the partisanship on this issue. We really have to go beyond it. And I do have hope that there's going to be compassionate individuals on all sides who will lead that conversation.
Thank you.
May I state, what you're seeing here is that there is common ground. It may not be 100% of what certain individuals want. It may not be 100% of what I want. But if we cannot spend our time calling each other names, but in fact trying to solve problems and not saying I got to have 100% or nothing, because I found that people who want 100% of something end up getting nothing. And so I am suggesting that we can work together to get something that will in fact work. You've heard the common problem that exists here. We have regulations placed upon us by Washington, and those regulations impose upon us things that don't make sense. They were done back in, for some examples, 1964. People thought that there would be a solution to do certain things certain ways, and that is to penalize success. And that's what it does. And we don't want to penalize success. We want to incentivize people to be able to share in the American dream. And that's the reason I use the phrase Medicaid extinction. Because you don't want to be a person who's having Medicaid if you can go ahead and be working and have a good employer provide a group health insurance program for you that does so much more for you.
Thank you, Senator Simmons. We are going to open the floor up to questions. Quick reminder, it's 30 seconds for your question. Just state your name and go directly into the question. I'm going to call a little bit of an audible here. Lindsay, our timekeeper, Lindsay, if you will keep time on the question. If the speaker in the back goes too long, please wave to stop sign. Please.